yourselves sorted for the week. It's just one of those busy weeks, isn't it? It all pops up at once. So obviously, a few decisions to make today, and so obviously our last item was challenging, I think, and really conflicting views. But anyway, we'll work through that. I have no apologies. We'll just here she is. Morning, Sarah Jane. Welcome. Please on. Okay. Call for the approval. Any additional business? I don't think there will be any declarations of interest. And just need the confirmation of the February minutes, and that that the chair's signature will be electronically inserted as the way we're moving forward. It's done anyway, but this is what's formally needs to be addressed. So just noting that it will be inserted after the approval of these minutes. So I have thank you, Caleb, second of Dane. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We don't have public forum this morning, so I'll now move on to our agenda items. So our first one up is item 7.1 is the approval of the draft smoke-free outdoor spaces policy for consultation, and we have Sandra covering today. A number of experienced staff away. Thank you, Sandra.
Morning, Mayor Adrian and councillors. Thank you very much. So your smoke-free outdoor spaces policy. This policy was first introduced in 2019. We had a number of health authorities come and visit council at the time and suggest that this is what we should do. It's in line with quite a number of other council policies to promote those smoke-free areas. So council's supporting our public health for enhancing community wellbeing. So this policy follows a non-regulatory approach aimed at changing behaviour and promoting a positive smoke-free usage and encouraging smoke-free. There has been some discussion about council's approach to enforcement, and this has been detailed in the report. Basically, what we're suggesting to the policy is that there's some minor administrative changes and some tidying up of some double ups and refreshing the maps. And we would like to consult our community about our long-term plan and other documents. Happy for question.
Any questions? Sarah Jane?
In all honesty, I don't really see the necessity to consult with the LTP. From the map, the Smoke-Free New Zealand map, it's pretty comprehensive in what the areas that we are smoke-free. I'm concerned that, if we go out with our LTP with too much, people are kind of just going to get tired of it, and we're not going to hear from them about the issues that we really want to hear about.
Any feedback on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just
Your thoughts, Sandra? I think is there a requirement to consult?
So because it's not a legally required policy, there's no timeframes. You're not required to have one. I think the idea is making it a little bit more well known to our communities. But I guess if council would like to not consult on it, we could do that in other ways. I guess it gives people the opportunity to have feedback should they have it before we adopt the policy, but there's no legal requirement to consult on it.
I think I might have made this comment a few years ago, but I used to be the tobacco control manager for the region from Tairāwhiti to Taranaki. One of the things that we were trying to advocate for from councils is the role of leadership of council, and I see it's noted in the information, but more about council being more forthright about its commitment to being smoke-free. So what does that mean for me? That means adopting internal strategies, communicating internal strategies that are that totally push for the elimination of tobacco, yes, across us as an organisation, as a leadership group within this district, and just using that as the framework to encourage others to follow. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it kind of does. And I guess, does that mean then if we do that we're going to make it harder for people who smoke in this organisation?
That's not the intention. The intention is to just take a leadership stance to say that we as a council support the smoke-free environment tax and support the 2025 smoke-free New Zealand Aotearoa.
And I guess by having this policy, we kind of are doing it.
It's a default position that a lot of councils have taken across the country. And I know when I was working in the role, we actually got Kaura District Council to fully adopt what was a kawanata approach, so that leadership framework led out by the mayor and councillors to say that our community supports these smoke-free things, and we would encourage our community to follow some.
So I guess that's something that we could follow up at I don't want to incur more cost or time on the organisation because we're all constrained around capacity at the moment. Let's be fair, everything comes at a cost. But surely we could do that in a promotional way that we do it. Like obviously with me on the netball courts, it's been making smoke-free for years. So, you know, there is that expectation. Going back to the long-term plan thoughts, is there anybody, like I sort of feel that the long-term plan is the long-term plan. We've got these other handful of policies that are sitting at the side. People probably won't, you know, they can pick and choose. This is a pick and mix as to what you want to engage in. And because we've gone online, I don't, you know, people go on that we over consult and then we under consult. So we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, is my personal opinion. And I'm quite comfortable. We made this decision a while ago that we were going to do this with the long-term plan. The decision has been made. I think it's a bit late now to suggest that we don't include it with our long-term plan because we've already made that decision to include in our long-term plan, did we not?
So are we saying that can we not put it in the long-term plan but not consult on it? Like, because I do take Sarah Jane's point, and that there's so much more stuff coming out that's more important than this.
Yeah.
And then following on from what Gary said, maybe after that's kind of out of the way, we could put some, you know, some advertising on Facebook or whatever that says, you know, this is the council's position. We back being smoke-free. Find our policy here.
Yeah.
Could we not do the best of kind of both worlds? Not take it out of the long-term plan, leave it in, but just not consult on it.
Well, if it's in there, you're consulting on it. It's separate to the long-term plan. It's just going out in parallel at the same time.
But we have an obligation.
It's not policing it. We don't police it. That's the problem.
Caleb.
And that's going to be the feedback.
Caleb.
I think this has to be more about for your information. More to come.
And I think that's why it's tucked in beside it, because it's not seen as a significant piece.
No, I don't think it is a significant piece. I think the majority of our district aren't smokers anyway, so they'd just be like, excellent, fantastic, this is probably what we would be wanting anyway. I guess to your point, Marta, Gary, we need to work out what's feasible with the 2025 plan as a council and what we can practically do as a council without impeding on the freedoms of our staff if they wish to partake in tobacco products, so on and so forth. So I guess that's something that perhaps we can nut out at a later date.
And I guess the biggest thing is that we don't want people to start smoking, because we all know that the people that do smoke, it's very hard to stop smoking. So to eliminate completely is, you know, that's something that's personal to everybody. And it was a right, and then to take that right away, I think is, while it's well informed around health outcomes, I think at the end of the day, it's a greater challenge than that.
I think there's a lot of really good information why we should do some things differently in the paper. You know, I think we, again, for me, it's a leadership. We're in this leadership role. If we can't lead on things like tobacco, I mean, you know, the data says that kills 5,000 people as a result of lung associated diseases anyway. So, you know, we can make a difference in this just by saying, this is our position.
And it takes pressure off our health sector. It's not just a single thing. Anyway, we'll park that Gary's thoughts until what we might do as an opportunity data. This is about consultation. So there's no further comment. Are we comfortable to leave it in the long-term plan? It sits there. There may not be much engagement. We set it up in 2019. We did include vaping, which not all councils have done, but it was our timing that we included vaping. We don't police it as such. There are, you know, you're about old person that vapes around the street and whatnot, but it's a leadership thing within a community. It's not a sledgehammer approach.
With that said, Your Worship, I'm happy to move all 3 points of the recommendation as it is.
Yeah, seconded James Sainsbury. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Good conversation. And we'll definitely, I think Sandra will note our leadership, how we will lead it, Gary. I think that's a good way of putting it. Right, item 7.2 is now the draft of the legal highs policy.
Thank you. So this policy is not mandatory. Council developed it in response to the Psychoactive Substances Act that came through to restrict. So as a reminder for those of you that work on council, then we can't not allow psychoactive substances. What we can do is we can restrict the geographical location of where they can be sold. So the authority are responsible for ensuring that products are safe. There are currently no approved products that are legally available for sale in this country, but having this policy in place means that if something gets approved, council has the regulations in place so that we can restrict those areas where they can be sold. So the policy has got maps there of where it would be permitted to sell them. There's a 300-metre restriction between your retail premises and a 25-metre restriction from sensitive sites such as schools, preschools, schools, etc. Staff have made some minor administrative amendments to the policies. We've got some new maps, not the actual map area, just to make them a bit clearer and a bit easier to read. And we are wanting to ask the community if they agree with the proposed policy, and staff are recommending that we do keep this one in place so that if anything comes for sale, then we don't have to scramble to get a policy together. Happy for questions.
Jane.
Again, I'm really not sure why the need to go out for consultation. The hoops that people need to go through to make their legal highs safe for sale is ridiculous. Or not ridiculous, sorry, it's good, but it's it's not achievable. So there's nothing on the market, and there's not likely to anything to come onto the market. So again,
What's this about being transparent as a council?
I mean, why bring something up that's not an issue though? And not likely to be an issue in the immediate future. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this is why if there'd been like the government policy, then we would have been in a position. But anyway, James.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you're saying, Sarah Jane, I mean, but I suppose as it's a policy, we have to keep.
The policy itself is not mandatory to have. You don't have to have one.
Correct, but once we have a policy, we have to keep reviewing and consulting. I think I made a point a while ago. I think Councillor Jagger and I are the only survivors from when this was put together, and I know it was very contentious because we didn't want to put it together, but the fact remained that there was the ability to sell that stuff then, and we restricted it as tightly as we possibly could have. And you just don't know what's around the corner. And I think if we've got something in place, and it took a lot of work and a lot of time to get to that position, so whilst it's a consultative thing, as it were, it's not really much of a consultation. People aren't going to potentially come and say, "Gee, we want a lot of places for legal highs," but we run the risk if we let it lapse, and then legislation changes, and get Chloe Smallbook in power, she'll change that legislation, and then where do we stand? We've got to start it all over again.
We've got the tools in the toolkit, and I guess the fascinating thing here is where the vaping crossover comes in, because vaping came in after we had the legalised policy. Not that it's necessarily legal high. I don't know where vapers kept in the smoking space. So I think it's just part of assuring our community that we have these policies and they're aware of them. So any further comment? I hear what you're saying, Sarah Jane, but I think again, we discussed it months earlier that they would go with the long-term plan.
Oh, maybe move on that.
Move James, seconded James Thomas, seconded James Sainsbury. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, now item 7.3 is the approval of the draft dangerous, affected and unsanitary buildings policy for conservation.
Thank you. So the Building Act does require all councils to adopt a policy on this. The policy has to take into account all of the dangerous, affected and unsanitary buildings. The policy has been reviewed, I guess, from a reader perspective. So whilst there's minor administrative changes, you'll see from the changes version, there does look like a fair bit of changes, but it's more so that the readers can understand it a little bit better. So, for example, we've added in some additional definitions. So at the council workshop, there was some discussion about the definition of a building. So we've made sure that that's completely covered within the policy. We've added some discussion into the report. And this is, again, another policy we are required to have, and we are required to consult on it. Any more questions?
Any questions? Topical at the moment. I think people are starting to, it's probably raising awareness of our policy, and there is a few questions around some of our buildings in our district at the moment. So might raise, as I said, raise awareness around our duty. Any comment? No comment. Anyone someone like to move? In second, Becky Caleb, second of Russell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Again. Carried. Okay, now item 7.4. The approval of the draft fees and charges. Due to the limited resourcing with ongoing work with the LTP, the ability to finalise these fees and charges have been deferred till the 20th of March. Just timing, just busy at the moment, isn't it? I think we're all feeling it. So we'll have to address that matter at the end, because we will need to add it to as an extra item to our agenda item for the 20th of March. So I'll address that later in the meeting. So I'll now move on to item 7.5, which is the road stopping at Harold Street. Thank you, Steve. Morning, Suze. Yeah. Layout, you don't have to walk as far.
Morning, Mayor and councillors. Yeah, I've got road stopping report at Carroll Street in Waharawa. We're not going to go through the report. We do take it as read, but I've got Angela Martin here from the Property Group, who's the author of the report, and we've got Charlie McReynolds and Kennedy Taylor here from the applicant side. I think you both met them last week at the workshop. So I think if you're happy to take it that way, just take the report, as read, but you feel free to ask questions.
I'll open it up. I'm really concerned that we have two opposing views from the applicant and from council, and it's really hard to come to a reasoned decision when you have a proposal. It looks, it's just how it reads and looks. So I'm a bit concerned as to how we make a reasoned decision when we've got lawyers taking different views. And need to challenge that view somehow, as to what the risks are. Around risk. So you'd like to open up first as our council document writer. Thanks, Angela.
I don't.
Thank you.
I guess the solicitors' views both provide the technical steps for the process. Perhaps where the applicant's solicitor missed a step was the criteria by which LINZ will consider a road stopping application for a council road stopping, and they have a very strict criteria, and that it must be for a public work purpose. So a private development would not fit the criteria under which they would consider it. So I guess that's the key thing to consider there.
Jeez, I'll let Joe speak to that. In fairness to the applicant, but I don't know that it's, we'll just hear from them.
I guess the only thing in response to that is it's still technically, whilst it is technically private, it's also for our public benefit. And as we said last week, it does receive government funding on the basis that it is for our public good. So, the lawyers, when they've had a look at it, do think that it falls within enough of the public benefit to that it could be gone through the LINZ process.
I could respond to you. So a public work is a legislatively defined term, and public benefit, I guess, is a broader consideration. LINZ's focus is very much, is it a public work? For example, is it a council roading project? That's their strict criteria. Beyond that, it's very rare that they would look at a road stopping. That is not council roading driven.
Any thoughts? Any questions?
To me, it's hard because it's something we want to do, but
It's a process.
yeah, sadly, it's council
It's
and it's public and yeah.
And I think it's understanding that risk. I mean, we can apply through the Public Works Act, and I think there's potentially I think it's about potentially 7 to 8 weeks wait for LINs to give it that tick off. And that risk, if it isn't a Public Works by then and it gets not approved, then it does go back to that LGA process and you're back at the start. So there's that other risk.
So I guess hand on heart, we're looking at it, sorry, Caleb, we're weighing up here the possibility of something that's not really totally a public works criteria in the Works Act. While it's a public community benefit, it doesn't fit the strict criteria of the Public Works Act. And we're weighing up the risk of if we go down that track and it doesn't follow through, then we have to go through the local government anyway. What is the cost to council? Is all these costs borne by the applicant?
Yes.
Caleb.
My issue, I don't really take issue with the criterion that is set out for a public work, and I understand that the road is for a public good. My issue would be any potential reputational damage to council, because if this is calamitous in any way, it will come back to us. And I just want to make sure that our risk is limited and that we can, we have a risk and insurance committee to make sure that we have these things in valid. I guess probably makes sense. Just go through the LGA, and save yourselves the.
Well, we've got that. We have to make that decision, Caleb. So
I mean, that would be my opinion, Your Worship, is that go through the LGA process, and then it's going to be a more suitable and more transparent process. Perhaps, in my opinion, that would be the best course of action.
Gary.
So just to help me understand, the applicant is the body that will foot the cost for both options, whether it's Public Works Act failing their local government act. I don't understand the risk. What's the potential calamitous damage and reputational damage that would occur as a result of that?
You answer that. I just answer that question first.
I guess that that road is a strategic asset, and council's not consulting its community on its proposal to close part of the road. It will sever access between Cadman and Carroll Street. So there's generally public interest in full width road closures. That's the risk.
Just on the back of that, we heard last week through the presentation that a very high level of engagement had already occurred in the community, and that support for this project going forward is quite strong. So, I mean, how?
So what's the risk?
That's the issue. I mean, it's if and when it's communicated, I guess the benefit to that whole community of Waharoa, Matamata-Piako, then yeah, I can't understand the risk.
So I guess the question there is whether people are consulted on Waharoa. Yes, they're supportive of it, but do they understand the process that council has to go through in order to follow through with that? And that's sort of two different questions, isn't it? Because when you consulted with the community, were they asked whether they were happy to have that road for both?
Part of the community outcome was wanting to realign the road to have it loop around.
Yeah.
So, and we did note that the road would be, so there would be no access through to, Cadman Street. Cadman Street, yes, back. But the loop road would go around through, McGowan. So Carroll Street would re-loop and go through to McGowan. So that was absolutely part of the consultation, and that was widely, required by the community, was having those two accesses onto McGowan Street.
I guess the challenge for us is that we haven't got that consultation document to fully appreciate actually the extent of the community engagement. It is because it's not our process. This is our process, and that is one of the risks. And I know, Gary, that Wahara have reportedly done it, but it's the applicant's process, the developer's process. It isn't council's process. So that's where I'm a little bit just trying to raise those challenges around our transparency, because we could be seen, and I'm not throwing out, I'm not saying we're doing one way or the other, but will we be seen as, and there's times we are the handbrake, and we'll be seen as a handbrake in this position potentially, but we'll also be seen as showing favouritism and supporting a developer in their wishes. So interesting space. So
But preemptive, but what is the solution? We can go round and round.
Exactly.
What is the solution to this? Because for me, anything that we can do for Wahara is good. It's a good thing. It's helping that community thrive and enjoy a better way of life. And so I just want somebody to tell me what the solution to this is in the best possible, fastest way.
It's going to be, I think it's accepted that everyone thinks that believes this is a good thing to do, and council is open and supportive of the prospect of closing that road to allow the development to occur as it's shown. There's no doubt in that. I suppose what we're faced with is that our professional advisor has indicated from their experience and understanding of the legal process of going down public works, that it's highly unlikely Lynn's, despite the merits of the argument, will see it as something that they can support the minister. Now, if we then come back and say, in knowledge of that, awareness of that, council resolving to allow it to go forward to Lynn's, not knowingly, but having received that professional advice, understands that there's an extremely high risk that Lynn's will turn it down. And I mean, council, as I understand it, are more than happy to propose to close the road. More than happy to. The most potentially, based on the advice that we received, the most effective way of doing that is to go down the Local Government Act. I can understand the developer's concern that that could result in a hearing. What are the chances of that? Given the work and the goodness of, you could argue not very high. What we do know is that the chances are very high that Lynn's will turn it down based on the advice we received.
Chris.
And to continue that on, that was a really good summation of it. To carry it on, the real issue is the applicant really wants to go this way because it will be in their mind quicker, so that they can get in and get some work started. Right. So if you go down the public works way and it gets stopped, you've lost that time.
They can start anyway because they've got Plan B, which if the road doesn't get closer, they can start because you need.
But the planning process has to start again, doesn't it? If you go down to get approval through the Public Works Act and it is not accepted, you then still have to go through the local government process. Right. So while I would like to see the thing go ahead as quick as possible, I'm tending to say our advice is that it's unlikely to be accepted. We should say no, look, just go through the hearing through the LGA.
The risk is the public works criteria. Peter.
Yeah, it's good to have this as part of my learning journey because I'm out of my depth with this stuff. But I sort of try to see the simple side of this. To me, I dare say way back in the distant past, like 1981, the Public Works Act has some criteria which this, application may not suit. Perhaps the problem lies with their criteria, and perhaps they need to address, perhaps more modern ways of doing things and look at applications on their merits rather than have a blanket rule that says no, it doesn't meet criteria.
It's not our decision.
No, I know. Perhaps a persuasive argument could be put to them that perhaps it's time they address things in a slightly different way. Anyway,
James. Thanks, Gary. Oh, sorry, Gary. I didn't see like the bottles in the way.
I still haven't heard what the risk is of doing both processes at once.
So it's the public works.
Yeah.
It's not public works.
Yeah.
It's for public good. That's two different things. Do you want to explain perhaps more thoroughly about what a public work is? Can you give an example of a public work?
Could I jump in with my question?
Have you got a question?
That's sort of a follow-on from Gary's question as
Okay.
well. So very thorough and easy to follow advice. Thank you. And so I guess I see two scenarios. Number one is we approve the Public Works Act that is approved or it's not approved. And if it's not approved, then I understand from the applicant that they'll then go through the Local Government Act. And in that scenario, there are three things. One is the additional cost, which is picked up by the applicant. The other one is the additional time, i.e. there's the 10 plus weeks to go through the Public Works Act, which sounds like which may not be successful or it may be. So there's a lost period of time there. Both of those are picked up by the applicant. They don't sit with the council, correct? So the only risk in that scenario that I see, Gary, would be this idea that the council's has gone straight to the Public Works Act. If it's successful, the council hasn't consulted widely with the community and has tried to bypass our responsibilities there. Now, I personally don't feel that way. And I'm also reassured that the criteria of the Public Works Act, that Linz is very, very concerned that the Public Works Act process is not used by councils to bypass that process. So in other words, if it falls down because Linz decides MPDC has used this in a way that's not quite appropriate, so be it. We understand the risk now. Everybody understands that risk. And there's a safeguard there. So again, I would come back to Gary's point of like, what is yes, there are risks of going with the Public Works Act first. Totally appreciate and respect the advice that given on balance, it may not be successful, but in a sense, that's not something that the council's covering. That's not a risk that the council's taking of additional cost and additional time. That's with the applicant. And given that the goal is, certainly from my perspective, the goal is to facilitate this particular development as much as possible. I'm quite happy to go with what the applicant would like because they are well informed as to the risk of both the delay and of the cost, and also that while I'm comfortable with how it sits with the community at the moment, I'm also reassured that that is one of the things that Linz looks at as well. And if they're not comfortable with how the consultation looks, then they won't let it go because that's just not permitted. So was there anything to add on that space? And does that sort of follow up on the risk question there, Gary, that you were hinting at? Yeah. But so, yeah, not totally respecting the advice and totally taking that on board, and good to know that. And if it was something where the council would be taking on the additional cost or be impacted by the additional time, then it would be a slightly different discussion. But I think there's an obligation to make sure that the applicant is aware of that if we ended up deciding to go down the public works side of it. But yeah, so I guess the only risk that I sort of see for the council is that reputational one around consultation thing, and I'm reassured that Linz considers that very, very clearly. Yeah.
Kevin.
I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do
as a council to facilitate this becoming a public work, to help out with that scenario? Is that something we can do?
It's not our, no, that would not be, no. Yeah. I think there's, there would be, there is nothing.
It would need to be a council's roading requirement,
Yes.
in council's budget to do the roading.
In fact, you could construct a situation where, well, off the top of my head, but you can construct a situation where you say, we want to close that road and build a new road. That would be a public act, that would be technically at our cost. I mean, we could come to some form of agreement which says you'll pay us for that work. But I mean,
In the sense of time to do that.
Well, yeah.
We're going to build the road and invest it back. So we do build the road and then invest it back in the end. So we do pay for it in that process.
But for us to undertake that now would add another line of complexity surely into putting
Well,
it
yeah,
in place.
then
So we haven't got
construct an argument like that on the fly is probably a little bit dangerous.
Yes, correct. Bruce.
Yes, but last week, my feeling was with James Sainsbury, right? Today, I think the risk, if there is a risk that, or one of the reasons they don't want to go through the local government is because of time factors and the hearings and what have you. If that wasn't successful, then if they weren't absolutely convinced that wasn't going to be successful, that's sort of saying let's try and circumvent it. And I think that's where we're at risk, is that we're being placed in a position where we're going to help somebody circumvent the system.
The normal process.
Can I just respond? Just to be clear, we don't think it's going to be unsuccessful going through the Local Government Act. It just carries more risk, and risk is the considerate time delay. Because if there are any objections, that means in the Local Government Act it goes to the Environment Court, and that's where we're saying the risk sits. Whereas under the PWA, it's the minister that makes the decision, not the court. So it's not that we don't think the Local Government Act may be successful. It's just it carries more risk from the applicant in terms of time, and it does carry a longer time process as well.
So therefore, the crux of it is what's our risk, and are we reducing the risk for the application?
So if it does go to, if we decide it should go to the Public Works, and the minister turns it down, so the Lins turn it down, you've still got to start the process again. I think that the advice we've got is it's unlikely to be accepted by Lins, and therefore you're putting a risk, that time risk, on yourself immediately anyway.
James.
Yeah, and just echoing Bruce a little bit, yeah, and also, you know, I think everyone in this room wants this received and wants to want a road to achieve great things. But if the consultation that you've done, pre-consultation, which you guys have obviously done, I mean, if that's been a really successful process, I know we don't know that, that should enable the LGA thing to go through reasonably seamlessly. And I know there's a risk there, I get that, but I still think there's less risk and less time involved going down that track, and it's cleaner for us, and that's where I'd be getting.
Yeah, because we go do one process and then we've got to turn around and do another.
Exactly.
And that's the risk. Yeah. Caleb.
And the Deputy Mayor just stole all of my best thoughts. Thank you, sir. And I think we want this to go ahead. Wahara is an opportunity waiting to be explored in terms of investment. And I really love this proposal because it's a great investment and it has huge future proofing capability, which is great for the village. I guess I'm going to steal what the Deputy Mayor has said and go back to what I said earlier. Perhaps simplifying it's the way to go. But yeah, I think the council as a whole, at least in my opinion, the council as a whole wants this to go ahead. We just want this to go ahead in the best possible manner.
James.
I think yeah, I guess a couple of things that I'm thinking. I kind of echo what James is thinking down the end, and the fact that I don't believe that, for me personally, I think there's huge risk for council. One being that the road that's there is not really existent anyway. If it was any kind of a loose road that was going through from one end to the other that people are potentially using at some stage, then that may have a different sort of an impact for me. But the fact that really it's not a road that's even kind of there, means that the consultation that's gone on, whatever they end up doing is going to be better than, and it's not going to have any impact on what is existing in my mind. So I guess, and also from the conversations we had from you guys last week, it kind of seemed like if you don't go through potentially the quick way, which is at your risk, if it's to go through the through the other way, where you might end up running into the environment court, it sounded like you probably wouldn't go that route. You would just use the road that's existing and realign it or something. Is that kind of the crux of what we got to?
Yeah, basically, yeah. What we said is that if it did go down the LGA route and someone did object, and therefore the remedy is you go to the Environment Court, we would then pause the development and submit a minor amendment to take out the requirement to go to the Environment Court, because it's just simply no one's got the appetite to do that. And we have got an option that can take that in. It just is a substandard. It's not a good plan, but we have shared it with Don and Sue, so that the officers are aware of what that would be. It's just not as good.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess to me, if it sort of keeps things simple, and I don't believe that there's a huge amount of risk to council, I think kind of give it a shot, and we're about getting the best development that we can in Wairau, and if that means that we kind of let you go down it at your own risk and your own cost, to me that I'm okay with that. Really
conscious that we start to go.
Do we need
to sort of meet people? Yes, we have to make this decision, otherwise we're not going to process. So I'll go to James, and then I'll go to Gary.
I'll have one more go at what I wanted to make before, which is that there's two legal processes here: the Public Works Act and the LGA. We're not deciding the outcome of those two cases. All we're doing is deciding which way we direct it, and good process delivers good outcomes. So if the Public Works Act, if it's successful through the Public Works Act, it's because the LINZ has decided that the criteria for that to happen has been fulfilled. And if it's not successful, then it's not. So in fact, I'm even more convinced that there's really not any reputational risk for us, because it will only be ticked off by LINZ if it fulfills the requirements of that process. And the process is there for a reason. And if this doesn't fit in with that reason, then it won't go through that. If I was the developer, or if the council was, and we were having to pick up the extra time and the additional cost, then it would absolutely take on board the legal advice. I'm like, just be careful of these things, but I'm not. And so I'm really happy to support the person that is doing that, and then trusting the process that's put in place by somebody that's not me, because that's what it's there for. Part of a community, we're there to trust that.
Okay, Gary.
Just one last thing. Can you give us some context on the risk to the developer? So we've heard you talk about time delays. What does that delay mean? Would that stop the development in its tracks?
So it won't stop the development in its tracks. We have got the draft conditions on the resource consent allow for a staged approach. So we can't, as we said last week, we can't work within the road reserve area that is subject to the road, and it's a partial stopping and then realignment. So that's just to be clear, it's not fully being stopped. But we can work on either side of it, because that is residentially zoned land that we own now, and have the ability to still deal with that. The bit that does become at risk is, like we said, the big park in the middle, which is, we think critical to the development. If we did end up being stopped through the LGA process and going to the Environment Court, we would then reroute that park, so it's at sort of more within the road reserve area. But the LGA is a longer process as it is, because it goes out for longer periods of time, and then it goes through a different process rather than going through Lindsay and through the Minister.
Look, I'll go back to last week and I'll say I would go with James. All right. You're taking the risk, right? So what wording do you need to say, because I'd be happy to move or recommend it. So it's the recommendation too, but it takes the local government out and says section 116 of the Public Works Act. Is that right?
Hang on, two recommendations.
So, yeah, because I guess that it's also the cost. It's also acknowledging that potentially this development doesn't meet the criteria councillors considered, that this application potentially doesn't meet the criteria for the Public Works Act. I think that needs to be acknowledged in there, because I think we all acknowledge that, but that it's in the hands of the process, and so long as the developer is aware that they are covering all costs.
Yeah, we
So do you want that as a, council acknowledge that all costs will be with the developer?
Will be borne by the developer, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we should. That's fine.
Okay, so do we want that as number 5?
We want to move.
We haven't even got there yet.
Yeah, well, I think we do need, like, there's, I guess we need a vote. We don't, Bruce is moving a motion.
I'm trying to get a motion.
So you're moving, yeah, you'll move it. Yeah, that the report is received, that the council provides, approves in principle the request to partially stop Carroll Street, because either way, we are approving that request. The council staff are authorised to commence the process to undertake the road stopping in accordance with section 116 of the Public Works Act 1981, acknowledging that we are aware that this application may not fit the criteria. Or not. Are we putting that in? Because we do know this. We have to.
I would say acknowledging that the council is aware that the process may not be successful.
Okay.
We don't.
Yeah. I think we need to acknowledge that or not.
No, I don't think you do need it.
No.
We're just saying we're going to go that way, but I think we need to make sure that it says that the costs are covered by the applicant, all costs.
Yeah, because I think the resolution will go to Lynn, so we may, yeah. Yes, I think even if it's in a separate line or something, there's another resolution.
Yes,
because it will need to go to
costs of this process. By the. It can go up number 5, I think.
No, I was just going to make a point about the acknowledgement that it may not be successful. I think that's covered off in the report. Okay. And you've taken the report into account, and I think.
Yeah, okay. So you're.
All costs are a responsibility of the applicant.
Yeah. So you're happy with that motion? Bruce?
Bruce.
Well, I'm happy with that. I'll move that.
And seconder and Gary. Any further discussion?
Only in regard, I mean, like I said before, I don't think anyone of us against the development going forward. I think that's really important. I mean, I won't vote for this because I want to go through the recommendation of our legal team, and that's not against the development. I just think we need to be consistent with what we do. So I won't vote for it, but that's fine. That's democracy, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we'd remove it for the LGA.
If it doesn't get passed, yeah.
Alrighty. Put the motion. Okay, so that we're authorising, read it all up there. So nothing yet. Don't put that there yet. We haven't done the vote.
I haven't done anything.
Okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Yes.
Yvonne, James, and myself.
And so,
Just because of process.
This
only
was,
because of process.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that noted.
yeah, we're noting all, Sue and myself. And it's purely because of the process. That criteria, I don't feel it's. But that's all right. We have that motion carried, so all the best.
Thank you very much.
I hope it goes
And
well.
thank you for your time.
Legal advice. Yeah, man.
Alrighty, we'll now move on to item 7.6, which was our
By the process, you're meaning that's not the legal advice we were given by our.
That's word.
That's what I was not voting for.
Yeah.
Can I see that?
the motion's been done, completed.
Yeah.
Right, item 7.6. Request for an extraordinary council meeting on the 20th of March. Obviously this is to allow for the consultation document that we'll go through, but we're also adding now the approval of the draft fees and charges that was deferred today will now be heard next week. Can I please have a movement for that approval, please? Thanks, Sarah Jane. Seconded, Caleb. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That concludes our meeting. Back to the stream.